In divorce cases involving children, custody is a big issue. Today we're going to talk about the top 10 tips on things you should be doing if you want joint custody of your children. I'm Jaclyn Robertson with JR Law Group, and welcome to Family Law Friday. Divorce is hard. Divorce involving children is even harder. And again, a lot of times the big issue is on what is the custody going to look like. So today we're going to talk about the things you should be doing if you want to get 50-50, at least 50-50 of your custody of your children. And by 50-50, I mean that they will live with you at least half the time. So the very first thing to consider is if you want to co-parent and share your children 50% of the time with the other parent, you need to live close. You both need to strive to live close to each other. The closer, the better. Generally, in cases involving parents that live more than 20 miles apart, there's usually going to be a primary physical custodial parent, because more than 20 miles apart, it just becomes too difficult to have the children going between the two homes 50% of the time. So, tip number one, live close and definitely don't live any further than 20 miles from the other parent. The second thing, tip number two, if you are seeking 50-50 custody of your children, you need to pay. You need to ensure that you are stepping up and sharing the responsibility, the financial responsibility of the children. And this means that you're involved in sharing the costs of the school fees, extracurriculars. If there's a child support amount that you owe, you're paying that, and just on your time, you're paying for the children, and that you're genuinely stepping up and bearing that load. There's no question children are expensive, and if you're going to be a 50-50 custody parent or seeking that, you need to show that you're also going to pay. So tip number three, if this is a case where custody is an issue, I always advise clients, keep records. You need to document. And while it's kind of a pain, it can be as easy as just having a calendar with you daily where you just take notes on when you have the children, when you are trying to have the children, and even if that effort is thwarted by the other party, keep records of your effort to show up for your children. And that will help you in the long run if custody is an issue in your case. And for tip number four, speaking of keeping records, also keep records of your involvement with the children. On tip number four, we say be involved with your kids. So this means that you pick up the kids, you drop them off to and from school, you know what their extracurriculars are, you are involved to the extent that you can, you are involved in their doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, just all of the nuances that go with parenting, all of the responsibilities. So be involved, step up on all of these different issues, and keep records of your participation. Tip number five, if you want 50-50 of your children, you need to have the space for them. Make sure that your life is tailored towards the reality of having children. And this means that you have proper accommodations. Now, does that mean that each child needs a big, luxurious room to themselves? Absolutely not. But it does mean that they're not sleeping on the couch and that you have a sleeping space for them, and to the extent that or means that you have. And so, of course, bunk beds are fine. Children can share rooms, but essentially you have a home that suits and meets the needs of little children that need their sleep and need their space. So tip number six, if you want custody of your children, make sure you have a plan for all of the ins and outs that go with parenting. Sometimes being a parent is inconvenient. And so what I mean by that is if you're at work, you're sometimes going to get a call from the child at school who needs to be picked up, or you're going to have a child that needs to stay home sick for the day. So essentially, of course, the two can coalesce, your career and the children, but you need to have a plan, and you need to be the primary person who's responsible, able to step up and deal with all of these realities of being a parent and not be putting it off on the other parent. So tip number seven, be realistic. One of the things the court looks at is the history of what the parents have been doing. So if you are going to pursue a 50-50 custody arrangement with your children, make sure that's something that you can actually handle, that it's realistic for the life that you've had up to this point, and even going forward. And so again, that is to say, just make sure that you can accommodate that, you can meet the needs of the child. This, in situations where maybe you haven't been the primary parent doing the physical caretaking and all of the different nuances that go along with that, you just want to make sure that if you pursue this, that it's realistic and it's actually what you want. And I will point out as a side note, if you end up not being the 50-50 custodial parent, this does not mean that you are not equally as involved with the children and or meaningful. And ultimately, it's going to be up to you what you pursue. But I just point that out because there are certain clients that sit with careers that have them out of town, regularly for extended periods. And that's something that's going to be less worthwhile investing the resources to fight for 50-50 custody, where your lifestyle just doesn't support that because you just wouldn't have the availability needed to be there for your children physically 50% of the time. Number 8, in cases where you're sharing the children equally, you're going to be more involved with your ex. That is the bottom line. So one tip that really helps make all of this possible and all of this less stressful is you just have to always be respectful. That means you don't talk bad about the other parent to the children. You approach the other parent with respect. Sometimes it requires biting your tongue. And again, just doing everything you can to treat each other respectfully so that you can navigate the nuances of co-parenting in a very low conflict manner, because that will mitigate the impact on the children and will also put you in the running for a very good co-parent, meaning 50-50 custodial parent. Tip number 9, if you are seeking physical custody, work this out with the other party. Kind of like that feeds off of be respectful. If you guys can mutually come to an agreement of your own volition, that's a very good sign that this is a good case for 50-50 custody, because both of you can agree. That alone, being able to agree on this arrangement, sets you up to be couples who can go forward co-parenting in the nuanced manner that usually follows a 50-50 custody arrangement. And as you consider all of these tips, such as being respectful, making sure it's realistic, diffusing the conflict, paying financially, it all kind of tailors down towards this number 10 tip, is make sure that it is in the best interest of the children. And generally, if you're complying with all of these other tips, it generally works out to be in the best interest of the children. But I point out this number 10 tip because that is what the court is looking at. If this is a case where you are not in agreement on what the custody arrangement should be and you bring it before a judge, divorce court is a court of what's fair, court of equity, and also the guiding premise of any court or any judge considering and evaluating what should happen in your case is contemplating what is in the children's best interests. So generally speaking, if you show up, you do your work to be a good parent, to pay for your child, be responsible, think of their best interests, those are the things that you should be doing to help navigate your divorce case through to a joint custody situation. If you would like to speak about your specific case, have any questions about custody or otherwise, go to our website at jrlawgroup.com or give us a call for a consultation. Otherwise, follow us on Instagram and we'll see you next week.